Hi guys, Binexel here, and today I'm making a slightly different video from usual. So, yeah, if you couldn't tell by my channel or if you're new or whatever, I'm a big fan of Pokemon. And recently, or like for quite a while, there's been rumours that there's going to be a new Pokemon game coming out, the Gen 4 Sinnoh remakes of Diamond and Pearl. And, yeah, and there's been leaks, like, probably a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember the exact date though. That like add weight to this claim or idea. It's probably anyway because the last remake, because we've had Gen 1, 2, and 3 remakes, so Gen 4 is the next step. So yeah, I just thought I'd give like my recommendations or just general ideas for what I'd like to see in a Gen 4 remake, as well as some that are probably less likely, but just for a future Pokemon game in general. So yeah, without further ado, here's my ideas. So first I'm going to address sort of like the big thing that people are wondering about with the new game, which is sort of like the gimmick, which if you don't know I'm referring to, since Gen 6 they've pretty much been using a gimmick for every generation. So Gen 6 had Mega Evolution, Gen 7 had Z moves, and Gen 8 has had Dynamaxes. And everyone's wondering which of those, or if any of those, are going to be in the Sinnoh remakes. Obviously, since it's in Gen 8, the likelihood is that it's going to be Dynamax, because like, with Gen 6, Mega Evolution was introduced, and then it carried over to the Gen 3 remakes. In Gen 7, there was no remake in it, so... Well, technically a Sun Moon remake, but anyway, yeah, personally, I'm on with the popular opinion of I'd like to see Mega Evolution come back, just because I think it's the best of them, in my opinion. Because like, it looks cool from like a lore perspective, and like Dynamax, I'd say is my second favourite, because it's obviously not as good as Mega Evolution, especially from a lore perspective, but in terms of the meta game, like competitive and that, I like it more than the Z moves, because there's like sort of like tactic, I'd say, to it. Because whereas with Z move, it's just you give them a crystal and they can use that one move, whereas with Dynamax you've got a variety of moves and they all have different secondary effects, whereas Z move just smacks them as hard as possible. So like with Dynamax you could say, oh, I could use Max Darkness and definitely kill something, or I could use Max Knuckle and maybe not kill it but will raise my attack stat. And also with the like non-offensive moves, like say Leer for example, I'd say the max guards that Dynamax gives it is better than like Z Leer or whatever you get. Because I remember a rumour that like Z Splash was a thing. Well, it is a thing, but I remember someone saying it did something, but then it just doesn't do anything. Also, while we're on about Z moves, I think the other two are both better on a quality perspective as well, just because like Mega Evolution is obviously like you've got the Mega Evolution animation and then everything's the same battle wise. Dynamax, you've got like this transformation again, and then you've got different animations, but they're not that much longer, I don't think. With Z moves, the animations for each move was just ridiculously long, and it got annoying and obnoxious eventually. And also the animations were like crap because they didn't work with the model. Like, it didn't look intimidating, because instead of like, because obviously no one expects them to like animate each model for each Z move, but the fact that they've just gone with these like really complicated animations anyway just makes it look shit, because the model isn't synced up to what it's meant to be doing. It's just like either playing the same animation, or it might have even froze it, I don't remember though. Yeah, but with like something like Dynamax, at least they just stuck to like animations where it's just either blasting something or something's happening on the ground or something, where the Pokemon doesn't need to move in a specific way. So yeah, I think in general, Z moves are generally the worst pick to bring back if they do, for whatever gimmick they do bring back. So yeah, also I think in general, because it's going to get confusing eventually, because when we get to like Gen 12 or something, assuming the franchise is going to go on that long, which it probably will. I mean, I think it is the best-selling franchise in the world, and the second best in video games. Yeah, obviously it's going to go on for a while, and when you look back from say Gen 12 and thinking about past games, you're going to think, hang on, what gimmick did that generation have? Did that generation have Mega Revolution? Did it have Dynamax or whatever? It's going to get confusing. So I think they do need to think of a concrete one and stick with it, or just remove them altogether. Because like in previous gens, I think if you think of Pokemon like a human, it's like the first 5 gens were like the childhood, where every new thing introduced was like something that built on last thing. So obviously like Gen 1 laid the groundwork. Gen 2 introduced Steel and Dark types as well as Shinies. Gen 3 I believe introduced abilities. Gen 4 introduced a physical special split. Gen 5 introduced like, it was like a soft reset for the game. And like, it was, well, Gen 5 didn't really have an out and out gimmick that big. I guess like TMs and that became multi-use, but it didn't really have a big thing like that. Its big thing really was just a soft reset, which obviously isn't really a thing that could carry forward anyway. But like, apart from like small things, like say, I think triple battles and rotation battles from Gen 5 haven't come back, most of the things built on top of each other. Because like, if they just suddenly removed like the physical special split that they introduced in Gen 4, then obviously everyone would be fucking furious, because obviously it's a good feature that everyone likes. So yeah, and I think with that being like the childhood phase, the first 5 generations, I think now it's in sort of a teenage phase where it's like, obviously there are still things that are being added and like building onto it, like the fairy type in Gen 6 and the new regional forms in Gen 7. But like, there's also like this sort of phases where they don't know what they want to do with like things, which like a teenager. It does seem a bit weird that they waited till 17 to start hitting puberty, but you can't help it. But I think they do need to settle down something, because I get from like a company viewpoint, obviously the gimmick is what's going to sell it. I think like with Gen 7 they didn't really need the Z moves, because I'd say the better, more interesting gimmick of that was the regional forms, which obviously have stuck around. And Gen 6 bringing in like bloody fairy types too. But yeah, I think they do need to just pick a gimmick and stick on it really, because it's gonna get confusing if they just keep changing everything up. And I hope that the gimmick that they do choose, if they choose to keep one, is Mega Revolution. Okay, so another one that I think is probably more specific to the Sinnoh games specifically, the event Pokemon. Because obviously, if you don't know, there were certain events that would allow you to get items. I'm not sure if they still do them now, or if they're like more rare, whatever. But basically, there were 4 events in the Sinnoh games that you obviously were timed, and you needed to get the event at that time and then get the item to do the thing. The first, well, I think these 3 actually were the last 3, but the first 3 I want to address are like the Votom one. There was a key to get into the Votom room, which obviously allowed you to get all the different forms of Votom, and there were also items that would allow you to get Darkrai and Shaman. Obviously, I think those will need to be added into the base game this time rather than just events, because I think it's one thing if it's like what they did for like I think 20th anniversary in Gen 6, whereas like you can get a bunch of these random legendaries that don't have anything to do with the story. But I think if it's like got a whole little storyline thing, because obviously in Gen 6 you just pulled them out of the portal, or went into the portal, whichever one. If it's got like this whole little storyline thing like Darkrai and Shaman did, and if they are from that generation, like that's the generation they're meant to be in, I think they should be in the base game. Because I don't really like it when like there's a Pokemon that just isn't obtainable in the game, or a Pokemon doesn't get addressed. Like Zygarde never got addressed in Gen 6 even though it was obtainable. Or like Mew and Celebi in like Gen 1 Gen 2. Mew just wasn't there in Gen 1, I don't think. I don't think you could actually catch him, and in Gen 2 you needed an event for Celebi even though it was a mythical from that region. And I think the biggest one is obviously Arceus, to which you needed the Azure Flute to get into the Hall of Origin to catch Arceus. But the difference between that and the Shaman and Darkrai one is the Azure Flute was never actually distributed. So I don't think there was ever actually a legitimate way to get Arceus in Gen 4. And obviously that's stupid. Arceus is a bloody god of Pokemon. It's like one of the most hyped up Pokemon in its own game. It doesn't get a single fucking... It's not even obtainable. It's not there. It just isn't there, which I think is stupid. Like I think if they are, I think they should add it as a post game this time. Like, because obviously I think it's going to be Diamond and Pearl released, which will, well, remade. So that leaves Giratina over as well. So they could have like a post game story with Giratina and Arceus, because I don't see it being Platinum that they remake. They always tend to remake the first two. So obviously we had Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and Suicune were just added as an extra bit that you could eventually catch in the post game. We got Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, and Rayquaza was pushed into the Delta story, the Delta episode storyline at the end. So I think like Giratina and Arceus could maybe have their own little storyline at the end, which I think could be pretty cool. Because obviously, yeah, it needs to be in there. Because I don't think there's like an official way to get like these Pokemon. Like if you've missed it, you've missed it. I think there is a way like you can use online, maybe with like emulators to get the event. But it would be cool to just see it, so you can get it in the game no matter when you're playing it. Whether you're playing it on release, like 2 or 3 years later, even when the next game's around. Because like I remember playing like Hot Gold or Silver as a kid, hearing about like the Giovanni event, where you find out that Giovanni is Silver's father, and like really wishing I'd gotten to experience that, or seeing like the thing about the spiky-eared Pichu and thinking and trying to do that, but you just can't because it's not there. And I think they should do away with the event thing. Like, it's okay if it's like a Pokemon that's like not necessarily in that generation, but I think for the storyline of that generation it should just be accessible at whatever point. Like Arceus, Shaman and Darkrai need to just be in the base game of the remakes. So another point that I'd like to see that's probably not as popular is like I'd want the Elite Four back, because I know everyone's like been praising the tournament style of like the Pokemon League in sort of like the anime style, but I personally prefer the Gauntlet of the Elite Four. I know it's technically a gauntlet anyway, but I think you can leave to heal in Sword and Shield between battles. I just personally preferred the Elite Four style. It's probably nostalgia. Or even though they did it anime style, because in the anime, after the Pokemon League, I believe you don't just win the Pokemon League and suddenly you're a champion. I believe, at least in the early gens, the way they did it was that you defeat the Pokemon League and then you go on to fight the Elite Four and champion, and that's how you get your spot. But I found that strange because I think in Alola, Ash won the league, didn't he? I've not seen the anime, but I never heard about him like actually going on to fight the Elite Four or the champion. Because I didn't really like the Alola Elite Four anyway in general, just because it felt a bit naff. I get it was like new, but I just didn't like that one quite as much as I liked earlier ones. Like, I do think if they do add the Elite Four, maybe give them like a bit of foreshadowing, maybe have them be figures in the earlier game. At least some of them. Like, I'm not saying you have to purposely push in 4 or 5 characters into the story just for the sake of having an Elite Four. But only like 1 or 2 of them. Like, sort of like how you do that one job with Lance earlier in the game. In like Gold and Silver. And since I didn't play Gen 1 before that, I was surprised to then find him in the as the champion at the end of the game. But I think something like that would be cool for them to bring back, because I just personally prefer the Elite Four to the tournament style. Okay, so now I'm going to go on to my last 2 points that aren't necessarily for these Gen 4 remakes, but just for ideas for a future Pokemon game in general that I think would be cool. And I don't think I'd make a whole video on just these 2 points, or ideas really, more than points. So I'm just going to chuck them on here. So yeah, I'm not suggesting these for Gen 4 remakes, because these are like dramatic story changes that would take place. And obviously I think with how popular Gen 4 is, it's not personally one of my favourites, but it is one of the favourites of the fan base in general. So I don't think they'd want to change it too much storyline wise. So my first one is sort of like a revisit to a region we've already seen. Like in Black and White 2, obviously we revisited Unova like I think 2 or so years later, and I think the Gold Silver games technically you get a revisit to Kanto like 2 minutes later, 2 years even. But my idea is more like 20 or 30 years later. So like to see dramatic change to the region, because like obviously in Unova, say for example, there's not that much change. You only fight different gyms because you go a different route through the region, and there's only like a few gyms that have like a new gym leader, or like I don't even remember the Elite Four too much of that game. So it would be nice to see like where you revisit much later. So like you get to see your like rivals as adults. Like I'm gonna, and like the characters have significantly changed. I'm gonna take the example. I'm gonna use like Johto as an example, Gold, Silver, Heart, Gold, Soul, Silver as an example, purely for the sake that I'm most familiar with those games, because I played them the most. My favourite in the series. So say like the gyms, obviously there'd be new gym leaders, like older gym leaders or older characters in general, like say Price and Blaine from Kanto. They'd probably be dead. Others might have retired. But like younger gym leaders like Whitney would be like more experienced, probably further up the probably a later on gym leader. Like it'll be cool to see what Whitney could do with the more experience, because she seems quite young in the game. Also, I think like someone like Claire would be like in the Elite Four or something like that. Maybe like some of the Elite Four that have been there since the Kanto games, like Lance and Bruno, maybe they've retired now or moved on to something else. Maybe they're on a journey somewhere. So it'd be cool to see who would step up to fill those places. Maybe like Silver, I think, my personal favourite rival in the franchise, which is a pattern in Gen 2, but anyway, I think he's very well written with how he comes around to, at the end I believe he comes around to being a better person, because he returns his starter Pokemon that he started at the beginning, and he eventually learns to treat his Pokemon with respect. It'll be cool to see like if he ends up like, if you have another rival similar to him and he's like authority figure, maybe an Elite Four, maybe a gym leader, and he like tries to help that person see the right path because he sympathises with them. As for bad guys, maybe there'd be a whole new team. If not Team Rocket, it would be cool to see like Giovanni actually working with his executives, because I don't think we ever got to see that apart from in like Let's Go, where I think Archer appears. and we've never seen him work with any of the others. It would be cool to maybe see Giovanni confront Silver, like have Silver maybe like do a job with you like Lance did in Mahogany Town, and maybe like it would be cool to see development between them, because like I personally think like maybe Ariana from Team Rocket is like Silver's mother. I don't know though, that's just a theory I have, purely based off the fact that she's probably worked with his father and she's got the same hair colour as him. Yeah, but I think that would be a cool concept in general, just see how the regions change. Maybe even there's been new Pokemon discovered, and if they wanted to bring in a gimmick like Mega Evolution or Dynamax, then it would make sense, because like maybe they've only recently discovered it. But obviously that doesn't really matter, because I think the general fan base theory is that there's multiple timelines with the Mega Evolution and that anyway. But yeah, that's my first idea. Okay, so the second of my sort of like less specific points are, it's sort of similar, it's like a prequel. So you get to go to a region before, so revisit a region but before the first storyline we saw took place there. So like, say you get to see like older people maybe like on their way up. So like maybe you see personally just a random guy, maybe you see Lance and he's just a gym leader, or any of them. Like you get to see maybe like Agatha and Oak's relationship, maybe you see Oak is the champion of the region. You get to maybe like for your rival you could have your mate, I'm gonna take Jen like Heart Gold as an example again, like your rival could be say Claire, a hot-headed girl who looks up to her older cousin Lance, who is a gym leader, and is like, I want to be a gym leader like my older cousin. So, and that foreshadows her later becoming the gym leader. Or maybe one of your rivals could be a lonely boy who's like angry at the world, called Archer, who, as I said, he's like angry at the world, he like doesn't have many friends, and maybe he eventually gets accepted into Team Rocket because he feels no one else accepts him, which could sort of like give background to characters that obviously aren't that built up on in the games. And I think like with Team Rocket, maybe like you get to see the founding of Team Rocket, or like you get to see who maybe someone else ran Team Rocket before Giovanni. That would be cool to see. Obviously Giovanni couldn't be like fought in the game, because obviously he can't get arrested because this is probably taking place before Red and Blue as well. But yeah, it would be cool to see how they'd handle something like that, because I think ideas like this haven't been taken on that much by Pokemon. It tends to just be remakes rather than like revisiting previous games. So it'd be nice to see like a revisit of the region. So yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Those are just my general ideas for what I think could be good ideas for a Pokemon game in future, whether that be like the Gen 4 games, or with especially my later points like just new games in general, because I'd like to see some of those things in games at some point. Obviously like my last 2 points aren't likely for a mainstream game, they sound more like fan game material. But yeah, thank you all for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.